though. It reminds me a little bit of a conference I spoke at once that was held in the Riverside Church in Manhattan. And I got to stand on the pulpit where I think Martin Luther King stood, and it was very humbling. I don't think what I said that day was quite as inspirational, but I did my best. I'll do my best today too. Let's see. So I want to talk about holistic education as a philosophical counterweight to American culture, to the dominant worldview of our culture. So I'm not so much concerned with particular educational techniques or a method. I come out of Montessori training, but I don't think Montessori or Waldorf or Reggio or any single model that's been developed, as wonderful as they all are, I don't think any one of them is the essence of holistic education. It's a way of thinking that gives rise to different models and different approaches depending on the wholeness of the situation, the people who are involved, the community that you're in, what's going on in the world at that time. So that's where a holistic way of thinking takes on many different forms. So I want to give a little bit of a historical sketch. This is how I got into the idea of holistic education. I was looking at educational thinking in American history. Where do our ideas come from? Why do we have the system of public schooling that we do? Where did it come from? We can look back at 1837 at Horace Mann, the Secretary of Education in Massachusetts, and the kind of system that he invented that really was the beginning of our public system as it stands now. We can look at the politics of it, we can look at what he said about education, but there are deeper themes. He was part of a culture, he was part of a system of ideas, a worldview, and that's what I've always looked at to try to understand mainstream schooling and the alternatives to mainstream schooling. It's deeper than just your particular educational techniques or methods. So the mainstream view, when you talk about American culture or the public schools in American life, we start with this sort of celebratory image of the United States. This is the great land of democracy, the great land of freedom. The Declaration of Independence says, proclaims that we are here to celebrate life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And public education is meant to forward that in every generation, to support young people to live full and happy lives in a democratic society. There's some truth to that myth. There is some truth to it. There are many people in the system who believe in it and who work for it. And it works for some kids, for some families, for some communities. So it's not a totally wrong idea. But in many ways, it is a mythology. It is an image that our culture holds without appreciating the complexity of the reality. That the reality of American history and American culture is not quite so simple. Alongside that democratic and humanistic idealism, there are some other currents of culture. And those are the things that I've looked at to understand why schools aren't as democratic and nurturing and don't provide as much life, liberty, and happiness as we think they could and should.